All right, it looks like I'm already live. I'm pulling up my questions here to ask Miss Lindsay. She should be logging on any minute now. If you're on, let me know if you can hear me. I'm not sure if we're live yet. Okay, I think we just went live just now. I think. Okay, we're waiting for Miss Lindsay to pop on. She should be on any minute. This one's cool. This one's warm, which I had it on. What do you guys like the best? I like it on warm, but let me know if something looks better. Oh, shoot. Waiting. Okay, it looks like I accepted it. Let's see. Connecting. Hi. Okay, let me.
How are you?
Every time I join in, it kind of
messes things up. Like,
hi, how are you? Are all the kids in bed?
yes, for now. Let's hope they stay.
What time is it where you guys are at?
10.
10. Oh, okay, so you're Eastern time then.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I'm in Michigan. Yeah.
Let's see, that's kind of late. Usually we do these lives if I know like the mama's on Pacific time, like 7:30 their time. But it gets so late. It's 9:30 here, and I go to bed really early because I wake up really early. So yeah.
I'm a late night person.
Well, you kind of have to be with, you work full time.
Yes. This is the only quiet time I get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So to dive right in, so everyone can get to know you. I mean, we've known each other since we were kind of put into a mom group by Wonderland Mommy Blog. So that's how you know. That's how we met. And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, when Ivy was super tiny.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ivy was still like a newborn, I'm pretty sure. So for a couple months. So we've known each other for almost your whole journey. But for those who don't know you, do you mind sharing with us about your family, your kids, all of that?
Yeah, so I'm Lindsay and I'm 33 and wife. My husband Sam and I met in college and have been married pretty much ever since I graduated. We have 3 kids. Zoe is 7. Eli is 5 next week, which is crazy. And Ivy is 18 months. I am a teacher, so I got my degree in elementary education and have taught for 12 years now, I think, which is crazy. Wow. Teaching 2nd grade this year, and Zoe is in 2nd grade this year, which is a whole fun thing.
Do you teach at the school she goes to?
Yeah, she's right next door to me, so.
You know all the secrets.
Exactly. Yeah, so Ivy, like I said, was 18 months, and she was a twin, and we lost her twin while I was pregnant still. So that, and then got a prenatal diagnosis for Ivy too. So,
if you don't mind kind of like sharing with us a little bit about Ivy's twin, her name is Willow.
Yeah.
And kind of your experience with that pregnancy and how you found out about your twin loss.
Yeah, definitely. We found out about the twins super early because I was having like crazy pain at like 6 weeks. So I ended up going to the hospital by myself because of course kids. So Sam stayed home with the big 2 while I went to the ER, and they were thinking like,
I think when I was reading your story, all I kind of read was that you had like pre-beta HD, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Really sick. And
super sick.
For some reason I thought that's why you went in, but you were actually having.
Well, so when I found out about the twins, I went in because of pain, and they thought that I was having like an ectopic pregnancy or miscarriage or something. So then they did the ultrasound at 6 weeks, and she was like, yeah, so baby's good, and baby number 2 is good too. It was like really shocking. You don't really expect to be told you're having twins, and I was by myself, so I like got to come home with the.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I like brought home the ultrasound to Sam, and I wish I'd taped that because that was hilarious.
Oh, I'm sure that was like a full moment for him.
Totally. So we had a couple other ultrasounds, like both babies were healthy, strong heartbeats we saw several times. And then, like you said, yeah, I had really bad hyperemesis, so super sick, losing a lot of weight. So they sent me in to get fluids and some testing done, just like my electrolytes and things. And the doctor kind of said, like, hey, let's do an ultrasound and check on the babies just for fun. And that was kind of, he started the ultrasound and then stopped really awkwardly, and called in an ultrasound tech. And I kind of knew at that point, felt like something was really wrong. And it was pretty devastating.
I lost you from my new setup. Guys, something a little extra tennis, please, and it's my first time using it. So technical difficulties on that.
That's awesome.
Oh, I hear my husband laughing in the next room. Are you watching this?
I know. I told my husband he had to hide downstairs.
Oh, so see, normally Jordan watches from in our room because he goes to bed pretty early. So he'll usually like fall asleep halfway through, but I can hear him laughing right now. Okay, I'm so sorry, but please.
No, you're good. It lightened the really like dark moment of. So yeah, I mean, it was horrible and awful and something no one ever wants to experience. It was really hard still being pregnant, and also trying to grieve because I felt like I wasn't connecting with Ivy. Yeah.
Right.
So
that actually
that kind of,
where you would think like there's some relief because, okay, you still have a baby on the way. But at the same time, it's probably really hard to process a loss.
Yes.
And you feel like guilty, almost grieving when you have another baby.
Exactly. It was like this whole big mess of all of that. And when you, if you lose a twin before 20 weeks, usually the twin then will kind of resorb into the placenta of the other twin.
Okay.
So then there's also not really like a tangible, you know, I don't know, like an actual loss. It was like nothing really happened because she just, I don't know. So it was hard. And so then I guess that kind of.
You still didn't know that Ivy had Down syndrome either, correct?
Nope. So
your pregnancy, did you find out? And how did you find out your diagnosis?
Yeah. So yeah, it kind of segues right in there because so they had to do a lot of extra monitoring to make sure that the loss didn't interfere with the pregnancy. Basically, they were constantly checking on Ivy to make sure that she was still growing appropriately and not having any issues from the loss. And so we found out at like 17 weeks, I think, that she was a girl, which was exciting and kind of helped me a little bit. And then at 20 or 21 weeks, they noticed a bright spot on her heart.
Okay.
Yeah, which they call, I think it's an
first marker as well.
Okay, yeah, and so it was the only one they saw, but my OB, who I love, was like, I just don't want to mess with anything, you know, with the loss and everything. So she sent me to a high-risk doctor to have a level 2 ultrasound. And then it was at that ultrasound, there were like 6 or 7 markers. Yeah, so at that point, Sam and I were both like, pretty much expecting it. And then I like originally was like, I'll never do an amnio. And then at that point I was like, yeah, I needed to
like that peace of mind to know.
Yes, exactly. And it wasn't going to change anything about obviously how much we loved her and that, you know, we weren't, termination wasn't an option, but just having that knowledge really just helped me.
Understand that. That's really similar to like how we felt with Treg, and we found out about the same time as you actually as well.
Yeah.
Type of things. We just went in for that 20-week ultrasound that everybody has, and I think that our OB kind of saw something before because he was doing ultrasounds a lot because we had previous miscarriage. So yeah, similar situation, and then we just wanted to know for sure. Like we didn't want to have to wonder our whole pregnancy. So yeah, totally understand.
And then I feel like so once we found out that Ivy had Down syndrome, which was, you know, you do all the emotions that come with that. You know, it was hard, but after a few days we were we were good and ready to tackle it. But the doctor said most likely once we found out that Ivy had Down syndrome, that they were probably identical, and Willow having Down syndrome, something with the extra chromosome, because that causes,
You're
prenatal
more likely
loss.
loss. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
And so that like really helped, like the diagnosis really helped me connect with Ivy and like bond. It was like all of a sudden she really needed me, and she
Yeah.
became so much more real. So like having a prenatal diagnosis for us, I really feel like saved me emotionally during that pregnancy with the loss.
Oh, that is so cool. I love that. That's a very interesting perspective because not everyone would look at it that way as like, oh, I've suffered a loss, now a diagnosis on top of that. It can be
Mhm.
really hard to even like comprehend all this, a lot of emotions going into it.
Yeah.
But so you had kind of 20, almost 20 weeks because
Mhm.
she made it full term, right?
Oh, no, nope. She came at
Oh, she
35
was
weeks,
early.
5 days.
Oh, okay.
So 4 weeks in a day. Hmm.
But she didn't have a NICU stay, right?
No, it was like
So what was
shocking. I
her
went
birth
in
plan?
long because I went into labor so early, they wouldn't break my water.
Okay.
So it was like 24 hours of just being in labor, and they wouldn't break
Oh,
my water. And I stalled at a 6 for like 7 or 8 hours. And finally, when the doctor broke my water, she was out in like less than 10 minutes.
oh wow.
Yeah, she was ready.
So
So
she was
they
ready,
had
the
this.
doctor turned.
Yeah, they suspected potentially her having esophageal atresia, which is where the esophagus and the stomach don't connect.
Right.
So as soon as she was born, they took her, like there was a NICU team in the room, checked her out and did an NG tube down her esophagus just to make sure, and it was connected. So then we
Oh
didn't have to
wow.
do a NICU, and she was breathing well, and so that was really awesome.
So you guys got to go straight home from there.
We did, yeah.
And so at that point, because we're kind of focusing on
Mm-hmm.
her tube journey,
Feeding.
um, she
Mm-hmm.
she was breastfeeding, right?
Yeah, she breastfed right away. Enough. I mean, they were, because she was
Which
so
is,
early, they were
I
checking her blood
mean,
sugars.
not always the case for kids with Down syndrome. Like,
Right.
I mean, that's especially considering now she has a tube, so it's kind of crazy. I'm
Mhm.
sure to think
It
that.
really, really is.
And I guess you
Yeah,
have
we,
experience because you have two previous children,
mhm.
but that's
Yep,
still
and they
just.
breastfed them. So
Mhm.
I did, yeah, I guess maybe some experience helped with that. I think honestly, it was just a gift we were given kind of to have this, after such a rough pregnancy. We had a really amazing birth, and then like kind of a month to 2 months where everything was very calm, um, and fairly easy.
And it's because
Before.
you were still home at this point. You were still on maternity leave, right? From
Yes. Yep.
okay,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so that's kind of what transitioned into you having to go back to work, her having different problems with feeding.
Yeah. Yep. So she could not figure out a bottle. Like
Mhm.
we started trying it maybe 2 weeks or so, and she
Okay,
just couldn't figure it
because you
out. We
knew
tried.
all along, like, okay, I'm gonna go back to work, so let's transition
Mhm.
her to a bottle. Okay.
Yeah. So that
So
was
that's
part of
like
it, was
the
that she just.
opposite of Treg. We stayed in the NICU for 1 month, and
Mhm.
I pumped for Treg almost up to a year, just always
Wow.
hoping to latch. So
Mhm.
we would, up to a year old, I would always still practice trying to get
Oh,
to latch. And
yeah.
we saw a lactation specialist for like 3 months. And then of course all the time in the NICU you have lactation
Yeah.
in trying to help, and he just could not figure out eating, period. So
Right.
coming up on a month, and they're like, okay, well, you guys can figure out how to do an NG tube in case you have to go home on that. So we learned how to do
Hmm.
an NG tube, and right as we're like doing room trials for oxygen, so maybe we can go home on the NG tube, he took a bottle. And so
Oh my gosh.
it was a miracle. Yeah, it was great. And then he wasn't gaining weight, which we'll kind of talk about Ivy because that was kind of an
Hmm.
indicator that you guys needed to go back in. Treg wasn't
Right.
gaining weight. And then he was taking about an hour and a half to eat one bottle,
Yeah.
which was 4 ounces. So that's a really long time. And I don't know if you had to do it with Ivy, but kind of the pacing. I guess she was breastfed, so it's a little bit different. But Trick had to be paced with the bottle, so we had to like pour it in his mouth, empty it. It was a whole ordeal. And basically, our doctor said, okay, if he's still doing this in 3 days, you have to come back in, and we're gonna look at putting the NG tube back in.
Yeah.
Like, so that was interesting, and we just got so lucky with Trey. Eating still isn't something he loves, but he does it, and like we're so grateful for that, because things could have been so different, as in your case. So at what point did you realize she wasn't really gaining weight and that you guys should take her into her pediatrician?
Yeah, it was, I mean, really because like our pediatrician did like a 1 week check and a 2 week check. And I think because she had Down syndrome, she was just more, just better about checking her out with those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then it just was kind of this snowball of, she wasn't gaining weight. She was clearly experiencing some pretty bad reflux. And she was like, so then we started reflux medicine, and then she was like choking and gagging and spluttering on the medicine. So then we were like, okay, is she aspirating?
Parent. And I'm sure you almost did feeding times at this point.
Totally. And she was nursing every 30 to 90 minutes around the clock, like literally
for
24 hours. Yeah. And so I couldn't go back to work because that was the only way she could eat. It was like she was just attached to me. So it was kind of all of those things. So the swallow study showed that all of her muscles were so disorganized. They would syringe a tiny bit of liquid in, and it would take her like 8 or 9 swallows to just get that tiny bit down. So kind of at that point,
don't have any feeding issues. Like the normal baby would just suck, swallow, breathe, suck, swallow, breathe. Or when they're an infant, suck, swallow, breathe, right? They can sometimes take, I think that was Treg's like pattern was suck, swallow, breathe, because he strong enough to get like a full. So with her needing to take 8 gulps, that's kind of wild.
Yes, right? It was so exhausting. She would nurse for 1 to 2 minutes at a time, and then she'd be done.
Which makes sense of why she wasn't gaining weight. She was burning so many calories just trying to get some milk.
Exactly. So all of that, plus I have awesome teacher insurance, and so we needed insurance. So like it was like I really did have to go back to work. So kind of all of those things combined said we needed to get a tube. And then right around that time too, when everything was hitting the fan, she had a chest x-ray because we thought she might have pneumonia, and they found intestines in her chest, and realized through this x-ray that she had a diaphragmatic hernia, which is a hole in your diaphragm. So she had a bunch of intestines loose out there.
When they found out?
Like 3 months.
Is that crazy to go that long without knowing?
So I guess with diaphragmatic hernias, there are 2 types. 98% of them are, I can't remember the type it is, but that's the type that usually like you find in utero. They need surgery immediately after birth because their lungs don't develop, like all kinds of things. The 2% that Ivy had is called a morgagme diaphragmatic hernia, and it's more common in kids with Down syndrome. And it's more benign side effects like the reflux, mild problems breathing, but not as like dangerous.
So all these things kind of correlated with her causing her not to be able to feed to her like full capability.
Yep. So it was at that point we decided she needed surgery to fix the hernia. So we figured let's do that, and we'll do a tube because that just seems to be where we're headed. But we had to wait until she'd been healthy for 6 weeks to put her under anesthesia. So we did an NJ tube first.
Okay.
And that's, I feel like there's so much when you're talking feeding stuff. And I feel like the J is something a lot of people don't know about. So you can have an NG or an NJ, and then a G or GJ.
Between those two?
So G stands for gastric. So that's the hole going right into the stomach. And then if there's a J, then there's
actually.
Yeah. So there's a second, if you do an NJ, it's going through the nose, passing through the stomach and into the small intestine into a place called the jejunum, which starts with a J, which is why it's J.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, because her reflux was so bad, they decided.
Okay. That makes sense.
So, and as soon as we did that, as soon as we started feeding her into her intestine, it was amazing, the change that we saw. Like it really was the right way to go for us, because her reflux symptoms lessened so much. She was so much happier, and just, yeah, it just was
She wasn't
totally the right thing.
expending all her energy eating at this point.
Yes. And so if you have a tube going, if you're getting fed into your intestine, you can't put like a whole bottle's worth into the intestine because the intestine's so small. So she was attached to a pump, and I had an IV pole in our house, like with a bag of milk. And so she was just continually being fed little bits of milk through her intestine 20 hours a day. So 20 hours a day she was hooked up to, yeah, we had to kind of carry her on, kind of like if you're on oxygen.
Right? Where it takes a little bit of time, but no longer than like 30 minutes for the, couple ounces to.
Yeah, if you do the bolus into the stomach, right. But yeah.
But because it was an NJ tube, it's kind of a continuous,
Yeah. So that was a
so
whole,
it probably made things confining and
yeah, a little bit
limited.
Dragging around the IV pole everywhere I went, cooking dinner, trying to like drag the IV pole side to side because, yeah, it was.
When did you transition from that to, she had 2 different types of G tubes?
Yeah, she went from the NJ, and then she had her surgery where they fixed her diaphragmatic hernia. She had a lip tie, so they did that, and then placed the GJ tube. So same as the NJ, except going into the stomach and the intestine. So like the GJ tube is bigger.
She did that just 6 weeks later if she was for the 6 weeks.
Yeah, so it was like her 5-month birthday was when her surgery was. And so she was then on continuous feeds all the way until this past summer. So,
this new G tube.
Well, this summer we finally got to transition from her intestinal feeds to stomach feeds. So I think it was in early August we switched the GJ tube for the G tube. So now she just has a G tube, which means it's really short. It goes right into her stomach, and then we're able to feed her like 4 or 5 ounces at a time at specific meal times.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do her meal times look like as far as like what times, how often, how much? You said 4 ounces?
It kind of depends on. Yeah. So she does 5 feeds a day. We kind of typically do 9, 12, 3, 6, 9, kind of just ballpark every 3 hours.
Like a baby with a bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I am we do a blended diet we just started on Thanksgiving, over Thanksgiving break, doing a blended diet.
Not that long ago.
Yeah. So she was getting breast milk up until the end of the summer. And then they switched us to pediatric formula.
Time too.
Yeah. Yes. We deserve a bath,
I
right?
miss it now that I'm not burning like an extra, what do they say, 600 calories a day. I miss it now, but it's
the worst when you're doing it.
Deep in a closet, don't want to look at it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
so
this would always make fun of me that they'd call me and could hear that machine in the background.
Oh yeah, like the constant
24/7. But you were in school, so you probably had to do like in between like little breaks, recess.
Yes, recess time, and I had it down to a science.
Oh, it's so funny. So what is her blends like now? Like what foods do you put in and
so
micronutrients?
It just felt really important to me. We were doing pediatric formula, and it just I was missing that, a mom is supposed to feed her kid, and I know still I was feeding her, but it was really emotionally hard to just have her still on the tube. She won't eat anything by mouth. She used to tolerate little bits, but she had a bunch of airway surgery.
That she had to change, and now she doesn't want anything. If you guys saw her stories and the cake smash, the 1-year-old cake smash,
yes.
She was not pleased.
Nope, did not like that. When she had her tonsils and her adenoids out, and a supraglotoplasty, which is trimming she had floppy airway tissue in her trachea, or maybe, I don't know, somewhere that they had to trim. And once that all happened, it was a no-go on any food. Yeah.
So just that it irritated her, or maybe she just
I
was
think it's a
became more
combination.
sensitive after. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what do you
So
guys do now as far as, oh, I was going to ask you about your blends, like what she
her
feeds
blends, yeah.
inside of them.
Hmm. Yep. So we have kind of what they call a skeleton recipe. And now we're able to do different, we can switch different things. So basically it's like every day she gets half a cup of grains, half a cup of fruit, half a cup of starchy vegetable, half a cup of non-starchy vegetable, half cup of whole milk yogurt, and then a protein. So usually eggs or beans or something like that. A
Okay.
little bit of oil in there, a little bit of iodized salt. Like, so it's just a whole.
Yeah, I saw that you had like certain micronutrients like salt in there. So
Yes. Yeah.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
So a
so is there
dietitian
a
kind
certain
of helped
measurement
us do that.
of things like salts, sugars, anything like
Mm-hmm.
that? Okay. And
Yeah.
then I can't remember. Did you say she takes a probiotic? I was trying to read that list of what's
It's a
on there.
right now we've got vitamin D and calcium supplement.
Okay.
I want to add a probiotic, but I haven't figured that out yet. I feel
That's a
like I'm
whole
still
other
figuring
thing.
everything out as I go. And she
And it's
just
only been
now,
a couple months of her.
yeah. Well,
Well,
and now
she's
we've
the
got a
healthiest baby in the
possible.
world if that's what she eats every day.
She is way healthier than
Serious.
anybody in my family. So we've got a
I need to get
possible
on her
celiac
diet.
diagnosis.
You said she does?
Just that's like something that we just figured out as a possibility. So that's another, like, I feel like her food feeding stuff has
Is
so
that
many
common
layers.
in like kids at that age? I had
No,
no idea.
it's,
Okay,
I
I
mean,
didn't
it's
think so.
more common in kids with Down syndrome, but usually the
Oh,
effects don't show until they have more exposure. So she's pretty young,
okay.
and
She
her
said that
test right
she's
now.
getting such a wide variety in her diet. A lot of kids are too picky to have that kind of
Yeah,
variety. So
yeah. So we're trying to figure that out.
that's a whole nother step. Like,
Yes.
are any of you guys? Could you hear me? Oh,
What?
Lindsay, I think I'm covering.
I can hear you now. Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear
My
me?
screen went blank for a second. Oh, we got a few questions, but we're gonna come to that in just a second. I think we're finishing up. I wanted to ask you a
Yes.
few things. You guys can keep leaving your questions below, and we're gonna take the last few minutes to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you wanted to know about therapy, right?
Yes. What does Ivy work on in therapy as far as does she do any type of
Mm-hmm.
feeding therapy? Which I saw in your stories, you kind of touched on that.
Yeah. So we've done feeding therapy from when she was like 2 weeks old.
Okay.
And kind of this summer, I got really frustrated and felt like we are making no progress. And, it's like we go there and they basically, I felt like,
therapy for like 3 months at a time during the summer.
mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's totally
So
understandable.
we're lucky enough to have an intensive feeding therapy program really close to us. And so as of right now, we're planning on doing that with her.
Right?
Yeah, in June and July. And it's basically 8 weeks where you're there 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. So like
Job.
full-time job, yes,
You obviously have to
basically.
wait till the summer and you have off work.
Exactly. So I think their success rate is like 73% of kids who come in with a tube end up off the tube. So they have pretty high success rates. I don't know a ton about it yet, about how they work, but I've heard it's kind of similar to ABA therapy, which,
okay.
yeah. So we'll see. That's kind of, I feel like that's our main hope right now.
It's kind of what on is like, okay, this summer is kind
Yeah,
of the
exactly. So our goals right now are basically for her to be able to sit in her high chair without freaking out and have spoons.
Or just freak her out like she doesn't even want to sit. Okay.
Yeah,
so
at this point.
Associating feeding time
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah. And like spoons and bowls and things like that without food in them, to have her like accept those things and like chew on spoons and let me put a spoon in her mouth that doesn't have anything on it. Kind of those are very basic goals.
Yeah. Well, basic to some people, but to her, that's like a huge step, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Kind of building that trust and the ability to handle all that sensory input.
And so I had one of the questions, what's your goal 6 months to a year? But
Mhm.
in 6 months, that's when that school is going to, or class,
Yes. Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, I guess,
Mhm.
start. And so
Yeah.
you'll be in there with her that full, what
Yeah,
is it?
so I stay with her, but like 7 or 8 weeks they said to plan on. They start without me in the room. So they have like a one-way mirror basically that I watch all the sessions from, but they do it without the parent at first for the first few weeks, and then they train the
Oh,
parent. So they've got a whole methodology to it.
wow.
So I'm interested to see how
Yeah.
it all works.
And then
Yeah.
our last question, before we answer the ones that it
Mhm.
looks like we've had quite a few. What is one thing you wish people knew about tube feeding?
A couple things. One is I feel like there's a lot of opinions out there that like tube feeding is a cop out kind of thing. Like,
Oh,
oh, it's just
yeah.
too, your kid is too picky or you just can't, like, and so I just, for people to understand that like no one wants their kid to have a tube. Like it's not the best case scenario any of us hope for our kids, but
Right.
some of our kids need that. And if you saw pictures of her before her tube and after her tube, like the amount that she put on weight, started meeting milestones, all of those things,
She's
like,
thriving because of the tube.
yes, it can be such a lifesaver. Um, and to parents, I guess what I would want parents who may be looking at a feeding tube to know is that it's not as scary as it seems. I'm not a medical person at all, and now I change her G tube every 3 months. Like I pull it out and clean it and put a new one in. And if I can do it, you
That's
can do
one
it.
that I definitely think is when I look at those, like, okay, that's going to be really hard to manage.
Hmm.
So
And
that
really get, just like with anything, you get it down to, a science. And I feel
it
like we've
becomes
we've
your
got it.
normal, right?
Exactly. At the beginning, be prepared to like I've what we call fed the bed. Like, I didn't have something hooked up right. And so her milk was pumping all night, like just soaking her bed. I mean,
Uh,
there'll be messes and you'll screw up, but we all do. So
that's a good perspective to have. We jump into some of these questions. We've had some good ones. Someone asked how old she is. We kind of touched on that, but
yeah, she's 18 months.
and then let's see. I jumped on late, but has she had a feeding tube since birth? So
Yeah. So
that. And
she got her NJ at 4 months and her GJ at 5 months.
let's see. I went to school. I ate lunch in the library. I was Down syndrome, my age, 18 years old. Oh, I'm so glad you got on. Send us a message. We would love to talk to you as a live
Yes.
sometime. That would be so fun for us. Do you have her in PT? Someone asked.
Yes, yeah. So that's the one therapy that we've kind of stayed pretty constant with. So she goes to physical therapy once a week. My awesome mother-in-law takes her, which is
Oh,
great because I can't. Yeah, so
her tube, does she have any different like obstacles as far as doing PT or any type of physical work? Does the tube kind of prevent her from doing certain things?
at first, yes, like it was definitely a learning curve for her to figure out what was comfortable and what wasn't, especially with the GJ tube when she was constantly hooked up to that tube, like when she would roll and things, like
Oh, yeah.
she stopped rolling on that side. And that kind of stuff. So it took some work, but she has a Spio vest. I don't know if you've heard of those or seen them.
No.
They're like, they're almost like spandex kind of.
Oh, okay.
And it like provides sensory input to their core basically. And putting
Oh,
that
okay.
on like helps stabilize everything.
I
And so
used
that
to
really
use
helps.
that when we first started OT because he could
Yeah.
not calm down during OT. So
Yes. Yeah.
put him in
Hmm.
that. He doesn't need it anymore now that he's used to the atmosphere. But yeah,
Yeah.
those really worked wonders
Hmm.
at first.
And that
Okay.
like stabilized the tube, which really helped.
Wow, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And maybe she feels more comfortable being like mobile, knowing she has that extra kind of guard.
Yeah. Hmm.
Do we have any other questions? I remember those days, but it gets better eating everything now. New problem, lol. That's a Someone said, let's see, my extraordinary life. Oh, okay. So Micah must, she must be talking about Micah. He's a hot Cheetos lover. So, yep. No questions here. Just had to let you know how much I love me some Ivy. Mila, I enjoy watching her every night. I love that.
She's the sweetest.
And then someone mentioned, oh, 3 is love. Hi, how are you? She mentioned that they had.
Yeah, Aiden had a SPO. Mm-hmm. Okay. That has been so helpful.
And do you guys just use that during therapy times, or do you use it throughout the day, or?
It's kind of dependent on the period in life and like how she's tolerating it right now. She only wants it on during therapy, but there was a time when it really like helped her feel more secure, so she would wear it more often. And I noticed like a huge difference. I think she got it around 9 months. And when I would hold her with one arm without the vest, she was still so floppy. It was like I had to constantly have 2 arms. And having the vest on, I could actually hold her with one arm, which was huge.
Because Trey used it for more sensory issues, but it makes sense that it would give her enough input to really use those muscles. That's, I mean, he was quite a bit older when he was using it, so that's that's cool. My extraordinary life, I remember those days, but it gets better every night. I have Down syndrome. Someone else. I love that. I sent the question thing. What? I sent questions.
Yeah. 3 is love is saying that SPO vests are size adjustable, which is true, which is really nice. So they can fit for little teenies and as they get older too.
There was well, we just can take a few more questions. Do you have her in OT right now?
So OT, we actually just this week, yesterday, called the pediatrician because she hasn't had OT or speech, and I was kind of feeling like maybe that's something.
Doing feeding within speech, right?
Well, actually, our feeding therapist was an OT actually.
Oh,
so I guess technically but it wasn't like it was specifically feeding.
On feeding. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to get some other types of therapy because I feel like she could really benefit from those.
Craig did feeding therapy through a speech pathologist.
I feel like that's more normal.
Yeah, he did she was like vital stem certified. So he did vital. I think that's the correct term. So he did vital stem for feeding.
Okay.
So he'd be all put up and they would like give him his bottles, things like that.
Interesting.
It was really interesting. Now his speech therapist, they don't have anyone certified here to do it on pediatrics, but now his speech therapists say that they can tell that he's had it because he has you guys always see him do
those muscles.
He has really good lip closure. So I'm like, well, it worked. I wish I could get him back in there because as time's going on, I notice his tongue coming out more. Interesting. Yeah. I sent quite question. Oh, I love you. How old? 18 months, right?
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for all of our questions. And we ran 6 minutes over. I told you we might run out of any questions.
I know. Feeding stuff, I feel like her feeding stuff is just, there's so much to talk about.
And I didn't know anything. So I felt like I was learning along with everyone else too. So it was really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. And for those who are just tuning in now, we will save the live. We put them up on YouTube, and just recently we've started putting them up on a podcast. So if you listen,
that's awesome.
Have that on there as well. So it'll also be on here for 24 hours if you missed it. So we'll have all that out. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Taylor.
So good to talk to you. Bye, Lindsay. Bye, guys.
Bye.